Continuing again with more factoring. Today's focus will only be on, it's called factoring by grouping. All right, factoring by grouping. All right, so I'm going to try a visual approach using placement values and stuff so that we can understand how this works. Now, if you have M times a box plus N times a box, this whole expression is a sum. I know it looks complicated, like it's a lot of stuff going on, but there's really one main thing going on here is a sum, all right? Now, the equivalent or shortened version of this is this. Now look at what it says. Now I have a box times that M plus N. Now this is no longer a sum. This is now a product, all right? So this is an expanded version with a sum, and this is a condensed version as a product. So let's work under the assumption that this box has a value of a plus b squared. So that's what's in the box now. So I have M times a plus b squared plus N times a plus b squared. If I'm following this logic, right, the only thing that happens is what I have in that box gets written one time. And then what's sitting outside of the boxes, they get grouped together in right there. Everybody see that? That comes into one box, and those come into one set of parentheses. All right, so I have another example just to make sure we understand the basics of what's going on here. I got M times x plus y plus z. Then I have N times x plus y plus z. All right. So which one represents your box and which one represents what sits outside of the box? If we pay attention to like the way I set up those boxes earlier, these will be my boxes. All right, so there are my boxes. And remember, your box is the one that gets written one time. And the M plus N gets written in its own little group now. So all I have to put inside of the box is x plus y plus z. And there it is. So one of the main things that I'll keep reiterating is the importance of knowing how to deal with fractions, because there's some skills you pick up in fractions that apply in algebra and throughout the rest of your mathematics. That skill in particular is called a greatest common factor. A greatest common factor allows you to look at two numbers, right, and see what they have in common. So like if you see a 10 and you see a 15, you're looking at a 10 and a 15, but what's in common, what's going on behind the scenes, behind those numbers, are they have a common factor of 5. If you know how to recognize or find common factors, that is a skill that you can transfer throughout your time in mathematics, because a lot of times what you'll realize is to make problems look simpler, you got to know what's going on behind the scenes with the numbers. And the greatest common factor is one of those numbers that you got to know, especially if we are factoring. So here's the working example. I have a 2xy minus 10x plus 3y squared minus 15y. One of your number one giveaways to know if grouping is probably going to be your route to the correct factors is a lot of times they will be grouped into 4 terms. 1, 2, 3, 4. That allows you to kind of split it down the middle, all right? You have 4 terms. You can split it down the middle. Look at this one separately. Look at that one separately. All right, so follow me through this one. When I see 2 terms, I look at the numbers first, the coefficients first. I see a 2, I have a minus 10. I know for a fact they have a 2 in common. I can divide 2 into both of these. So 2 is the first greatest common factor, all right? I then look at the variables. I have an x, y, and I have an x. they both have an x in common. So I'm going to say 2x. So 2x is the greatest common factor. That's what they both have in common. Now, what goes inside of the parentheses, now I got to think, if I'm multiplying things together, it should bring me back up to these two here. So if I multiply 2x times y, I get 2xy. That makes sense? 2x times y is 2xy. That's why we have to set a y here. Now, if I multiply 2x times a negative 5, I should get a negative 10x. 2x times a negative 5 will give me the negative 10x. And what I've done was I just factored my first set. All right, so here we go. I'm looking at a 3y squared minus a 15y. They have a 3 in common. That says y to the second power. That says y to the first, basically. So they have a single y variable in common. Now, this is where we have to use our multiplication to figure out what goes back inside. 3y times another y will give me y to the second. All right, so 3y times y will give me that one. 3y times y will give me this one. But if I multiply 3y times a negative 5, because negative 5 times 3y is a negative 15y. If it's done properly, your parentheses should say the exact same thing. So this is the step that brings us to where we started at the beginning, knowing what goes inside of the box and know what sits right over here, right? So the part that goes into the box will be what the parentheses say. That's the y minus 5 here. But what goes over here is the 2x plus 3y. That's what goes over there. And those are my two factors, factoring by grouping. All right, so I hope that helped. Remember, factoring by grouping normally has 4 terms that you can split in half. You factor one side separately than the other. If you do it correctly, your parentheses will match. Once those parentheses match, it's exactly what we did at the beginning. Understand what goes into one box, understand what goes into the parentheses. And that's how factoring by grouping really works.